Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Alistair, and 8 feet to my left is the luminous Marguerite.
Who hopefully is now going to show up on camera and can be heard at the same time. I really hope. We seem to have fixed the headset issue, so hopefully nobody's having any echoing. I'm not seeing the chat filling up with people going, echo, ah! So, fingers crossed. Visible and audible. Thank you so much, Ducky. Hi,
Stirring the pot of funk. For those of you who've been here before, you know what's coming. For those of you who are new, I'm very aware of the fact that we have people in from all over. Folks from the Magnus Archives in Rusty Quill.
I love being Tiny Marguerite. It's fun.
Tiny Marguerite. Folks from the Isle of Man, folks from York, folks from America. You are all welcome. For those of you who are brand new, the show is broken into 3 sections. First off, we have our opening fan art, which, as you can see this week, is the amazing crest for the Honourable, beg pardon? Worshipful Company of Yeast Couturiers.
Apparently, worshipful companies are like royal decree-based guilds.
Yes.
I think lawyers are one. There's like a lot of different worshipful companies, and they're very proud of the fact that they're worshipful, and I have no idea why. They dress up in funky costumes and go on a parade once a year. Everybody has a fandom. It's cool. But now we have an official crest for it, and more importantly, Wendy has made the crest available on a Redbubble.
Wendy has a Redbubble now.
Wendy totally has a Redbubble now. Well, Chungus is royalty. Chungus is totally royalty. Would you display the boy for the chat, please, so that I can show the Redbubble link?
Chungus, like the rest of us, is tired and hot, but unfortunately didn't get the memo about whether or not a woolen nightcap would help.
Yes, exactly. Also,
Surprised.
Worshipful Company, we have realized that Chungus has no pride attire, and this cannot stand. So I have to go shopping this week, I guess. I have no idea what I'm going to find.
Also, for those of you that way inclined, please consider yourselves tasked.
Yeah, exactly. By all means. We need to prideify the boy.
Pride him up. Pride him good.
Pride him good. I've never tried the whole bread dough that's dyed thing. I don't know
I
how
have.
It would work. How does it work?
Badly in the case of the rainbow bagel I had, I suspect was as old as I was. But I'd be interested in giving it another go.
Right now, the only food coloring I have is red and blue, for reasons. So we'll have to think of something to do with that. Beetroot's a good one. Yeah, I've seen. Channel Pirates. I've seen people do like rainbow breads with different like food additives and stuff. And I don't have that kind of time this week or next. But
because we're in
June is a long month.
15,000 meetings.
I know. Are they buys? They may in fact be cupcakes that say don't related reasons. Exactly. Union Jack Bagel. Oh no, that sounds far too complicated.
So
anyway,
that's the first section of the show. Then we have an opening monologue, which, as is often the case, is done by our very own house band, the magnificent Mr. Nate Crowley, also known as Frog Croakley on Twitter. Two-fisted game journalist, author of books, singer of songs, dad of amazing child. He's the best.
Amazing Child apparently learned about sweeping recently, but can't quite say broom, so says Zoom, and has been running around the house with a toy broom. And I'm like, this is a good habit.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of need to harness that energy in a specific, clean direction. Really well.
And then we will be continuing with our magnificent, lowest of the low fantasy novella, 9 Goblins by T. Kingfisher.
By the recent Nebula Award-winning T. Kingfisher, that's right.
Now half of a showbiz couple.
The yeasty lad is an official +1 because Bob is an award winner.
So happy.
Exactly. We will give a quick recap when we come on to the chapters. But you feeling like a monologue?
I'm feeling like a monologue.
Let's move to
I'm also
monologue.
darkly amused by the fact we always have connectivity issues right before we hop on, and I get a cough right after we hop on.
That is the way of things. You always get a cough inconveniently. Oh, he's a Tim Meredith. Okay, right. Here we go with the opening monologue.
Opening monologue. Content warning. Drugs, murder, swearing. Well, hey. I roleplayed Hitman 3's Mendoza level as a coin-obsessed idiot. Your money and your life. If there's one thing I've learned in the Hitman business, it's this. When a person sees a coin, they will risk absolutely anything to pick it up. Marguerite.
What?
Sofa cushions. Now,
Hush now! That is a perfectly logical, well-ordered survivalist instinct. And it was successful, I'll have you know.
Now, since I was made in the lab and all, I don't know much about money, but I'm not stupid. I reckon these coins they've been giving me for my missions must be pretty valuable. In fact, I'm utterly certain that they are worth £1 billion each, and I've got 3 of them, which makes me a trillionaire. So Diana, the boss, has taken me to Mendoza. Not exactly sure why, because I wasn't really paying attention, but there's this Yates geezer throwing a fancy party which she wants to infiltrate so that a secret society can make her queen of the world. She's welcome to try, but she hasn't got £3 billion, has she? I have, and I'm going to use it to beat Diana at her own game, join this secret society myself, and become king of the world. All I need to do is get into a position to impress them, and I'll be set for life.
I'm so surprised we've gotten through that entire sequence of you doing the I've got a few quid lying around.
I've got a few quid lying around. See?
That is a deep cut joke.
Edward Elizabeth Hitler, any relation?
Yes!
Okay, sidebar the first. Bottom, and this is incredibly appropriate because this is the 7th anniversary of the untimely death of one of the 2 stars. And he was a gloriously irreverent man who refused to accept any kind of grief or anything like that and just wanted people to say stupid, rude things. Bottom is Waiting for Godot with extra dick punching. It is a sitcom about 2 sleazy idiots, Richie and Eddie, who live in a terrible apartment in London and fail to do anything. It is, by some distance, one of the funniest things I have ever seen, thanks largely to the ridiculous violence and to Ade Edmondson's incredible capabilities to just absolutely no-sell. Just terrible lines. Like, there's one where somehow they are persuaded to look after the local shop, and someone comes in to pick up his groceries. And he goes, I'll just make it out in a check. Oh, really? Who to? Edward. And the guy's writing, Elizabeth Hitler? And the guy laughs and goes, any relation? And Eddie looks at him, smiles jauntily, and goes, yes! And it is never picked up on. It is a terrible show, full of awful ideas, and I love it to tiny, tiny pieces. And it is written across my heart.
Do you want to maybe do a monologue? I was just thinking, maybe.
I'm not massively experienced socially, so on my way down the road to the party, I decide to mingle with some rich blokes. As a conversation starts, I throw £1 billion on the floor in front of them. Then, as they start to reach for it, I snatch it up and stare expressionlessly in their faces. It doesn't impress them as much as I hope, but it does make me feel good. There's a camera crew at the entrance to the party, and usually I'd keep a wide berth, but it's hot out here, I'm quite thirsty, and the reporter's got a can of delicious fizzy pop right next to her. Now let me tell you, I fucking love fizzy pop, so I can't help myself. I walk right on screen, pick up the can and beast every drop, while staring right down the camera. Once I'm in the party, I have a bit of a dance, making sure to show off the coin in my hand as much as possible. But nobody comes to dance with me. In fact, a woman tells me to stop being such a freak, while a very posh bloke asks why I'm scurrying about, and it dents my pride a bit. I feel like a bit of a mug. I get a bit fed up, so I decide to stop wasting my time with these snobs. I need to get into that big house on the hill and show Yates why he should make me king of the world. The reason is that I have £3 billion. But there's some rootin' tootin' cowboys guarding the gate, and I don't want to disgust the rich people by strangling them. I'm stymied, but I figure that maybe a bit of assassination might cheer me up. So I lurk in a flower bed at the edge of the party, wait for a waiter to pass by, and chuck a coin in front of them. Ooh, they say, a shiny billion! But then, before they know it, it's Russell, snapperoonies, and they're dead as a brick stashed in the lavender.
I'm sorry. Russell, Snapperoony?
Snapperoonies, and they're dead as a brick, stashed in the lavender. This is great fun, and I keep at it. I've got a great big heap of dead waiters in the flower bed with me. Now who's going to bring you your fizzy pop, eh, you big posh bastards? I feel a bit better, so I wander off to find another way up to Yates's place. My luck's in. There's a security tunnel at the back of a car park that's child's play to sneak into. And what should be on the table inside but a ripe banana and £1 billion? I can't believe it. What fool has left this lying around? Well, tough luck to them. It's Ian's now, and he's a bloody quadrillionaire. Through the tunnel, there's some sort of fizzy pop factory, and a load more cowboys like the ones who were guarding the gate. There's no rich people here to be disgusted, though, so I release the beast on a lot of them, and take all of the fizzy pop to boot. There's a couple of Black Ops lads, too, with a sniper rifle. I chuck crowbars at them. And then it's my rifle, but I don't really feel like doing guns today. So after nicking the cool Black Ops clothes, I just use the rifle's scope to have a bit of a peer around, making quiet pirate noises and pretending it's a telescope. It's the fact the pirate noises are quiet. Arr. Arr. Avast.
Why would you make pirate noises when you can make pew-pew laser noises with a rifle? Come on, Nate.
There's Yates' house, and it's just across a field of lovely Argentinian lavender. Excited, I hop over a wall and scurry fragrantly through it, like one of those dinosaurs off of the telly. As I'm clambering about on the walls around the house, I hear a couple of guards having a bit of a chat, and they mention a safe in Yates' basement. Crikey. Maybe he's got a couple of coins of his own in there. I could be like a Silmarillionaire if I got my hands on those.
He wrote that sentence just so he could tell everybody he knew the correct way to say that word.
And he got paid for it.
I know, man. Nate.
Living the dream, my dude. I'm beginning to reckon that sounds like a better plan than being made king of the world, to be honest with you. Once I'm inside the house, I have a quick hangout with the maids while I look for a bit of a snack. There's loads more fizzy pop in here, and some fruit, and even a meaty bone in the sink. Yum yum, into Ian's pockets, it all goes.
Tonight's gender, meaty bone.
But I can't hang around forever. I need to find that safe. So I head down to the cellar where I find 3 more Black Ops blokes who mistake me for their commanding officer. Idiots. I crack the necks like pepper armies and bung them in a cupboard. I find the safe easily and get it open. But there's only some rubbish paperwork about a data leak or something in there, and not £1 billion coin to be seen. I'm a bit depressed by that. But hang on. What's that in the main room? There's a table here with fancy nameplates. One for Yates and one for Diana. Kablamo! This must be where the secret society are going to meet and elect king of the world.
Okay, hold on. Can we just pause and reflect on the fact that the secret society electing the king of the world put place cards on their table settings?
I wonder who are the members? The Gettys, the Rothschilds, the Vatican, the Queen, and the Colonel before he went tits up.
We'll come back to that. We will come back to recent TikTok crimes and the realization that one of Alistair's all-time favorite movies is getting a follow-up, a sequel. Are they trying to create the Axe Murderer cinematic universe? Mike Myers is back at it again. That's the short way of putting it.
Anyway.
Finish them all.
Totes profesh.
Lemon face.
Lion face. This must be where the secret society are going to meet and elect the king of the world. My luck's turned right around. All I need to do is wait here for them to show up and then wow them with my fabulous wealth. But if I'm really going to impress them, I'm going to need to set the mood first. And if there's one thing really posh people like, it's an extravagant feast. So let's get some scran set out. First of all, I carefully place a coin in front of 3 of the chairs. This is a risky bluff, as it only leaves me with £1 billion to my name. But I want them to think I'm so terrifyingly mega rich that I can give out billions like I'm just sharing a bag of Wotsits. So on the table they go. Next, drinks. There's all the tins I nicked from the cowboys, plus some fancy wines and all. Problem is, I'm a bit too used to assassinating, so I hurl them all at the table with lethal force, and they smash everywhere. Oh well. At least there's food, a nice apple, an apricot, 3 bananas, and a lovely rich meaty bone. Then one final touch of class, a massive brick of cocaine that I found in the guard's locker room. It too smashes everywhere. The feast is prepared! I sit around in the basement for an hour feeling more and more miserable. My murder vision, which can see through walls and everything, tells me Yates is still in his garden. It dawns on me that this meeting isn't going to happen at all. Once again, I feel like a mug. I bet the secret society people all know I'm here and they've just decided to snub me. Is my money not good enough for them?
Your single monies?
Fine. If that's the way Yates wants to play it, then we'll just have to do things the old-fashioned way, won't we? I creep back up to his house and have a bit more of a loot to find something really killy. Eventually, in the attic, I find the solution. It is a honking great broadsword. Yeah, that'll show him. I grab the weapon and creep out onto the roof to spy on my prey. I decide to lurk on the balcony to Yates' bedroom and wait for him to come upstairs for some kip. Awkwardly, though, his wife comes out for a smoke instead. Weirdly enough, she doesn't seem too bothered by the dead-eyed Black Ops bloke crouched on a balcony with a broadsword, so I don't want to take any chances, so I welly the sword at her neck. Then I hear Yates coming up the stairs. Here we go! I'm well cross with him for not coming to my party, and I'm dying to sword his idiot face off the second he enters the room, but I force myself to be patient, because there's a way to make this so much sweeter. Very carefully, I lay the broadsword down at my feet and produce the £1 billion coin from my pocket. As Yates walks in, I stare at him and toss the coin right next to his shoe. He doesn't even miss a beat, the big git.
Everybody should be singing that song at this point.
Wow, he says like a schoolboy who has found a really sizable frog. Yes! He stops to pick up the coin. For exactly half a second, he's £1 billion richer. But then he's got a broadsword through his head. And that is how I became king of the world.
The End by Jason Mendoza.
Oh, Nate.
I kind of feel like I have to play this game now, just to see how this actually... I'd say works, but I don't think works.
Well, I mean, I'm increasingly of the opinion that it's like Assassin's Creed, just with fewer hoods.
Define hood.
Hoods.
Yeah. See, you're talking about hoods, and I think I'm... Anyway. It was a play on words! Wordplay!
Go with the program.
The Pentaveret!
The Pentaveret! So, what's new with us this week?
Okay, you going to explain the Mike Myers thing? I'm setting you up for this.
Aliens. One of my favourite movies is an... Oh god, we've reached that point where every single film which I watched growing up could safely be described by Spider-Man in the Airport Fighters. You remember that really old movie?
With the water thingies?
One of my favourite movies.
Juno B, that's so amazing.
That's brilliant,
so
Juno
glad.
B.
So, can we go into detail?
Please.
A little tangent here. I also struggle a lot of the time because I spend so much time reading professionally with like finding fun reading, and anytime you find anything that encourages fun reading,
grab
yay.
it.
So
yes.
I'm really glad that you're enjoying Nine Goblins. Go back and also check out the VODs for A Witch's Guide to Defensive Baking, which is where Chungus and Bob are from.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much in the same vein by the same author. You'll really enjoy it, and it's just won one award, and the award season isn't over yet. It's going to be hopefully a multiple award-winning book. It's great.
Fantastic.
Now you may talk about Mike Myers.
Mike Myers' best movie is one of those sentences which sounds a lot like Jumbo Shrimp and military intelligence. I'm acutely aware. But to me, it has always been So I Married an Axe Murderer, which is about a mostly charmingly commitment-phobic beat poet, or possibly drug dealer, in San Francisco, who falls in love with a lady butcher who may or may not be an axe murderer. All of this pays off, and all of this is entirely secondary to the fact that this is the one movie where Myers' tremendous fondness for playing more than one character actually bloody works. I would argue...
I should jump in here and say this is the pre-Scotsman era Mike Myers.
Dr. Evil is born in So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Correct.
You could see the moment where he appears.
Pre-Dr. Evil, but also pre-Scotsman, post-Wayne's World Saturday Night Live Mike Myers. So honestly, the pinnacle of the Mike Myers comedic era. Are you ready to feel very, very old?
It was 1993.
1993.
Yeah.
I like that movie because it makes me homesick. That's about it.
Yeah, it is. It's shot entirely in San Francisco. We've been to a lot of the locations, and I am like Jake at Nakatomi Plaza in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. At locations.
Oh, I have the photos of him running around the academy.
That, and the moment we realized at Euro Disney they had a bunch of stuff from Armageddon, and my face threatened to split in twain.
Do I have that photo on
sure you
social
do.
media anywhere? I have it on my phone!
But
Okay.
the crux of all of this is one of the very best scenes in So
I'll
I
get you
Married
the photo.
So I Married an Axe Murderer is the moment where, as his own father, Mike Myers explains to Charlie's best friend about the Pentaverate, the secret 5-person conspiracy that runs the world. This is where the line comes from. You know, the Rothschilds, the Gettys, the Queen, the Vatican, and the Colonel before he went tits up. And then he has this whole rant about the Colonel. The thing that makes it,
Have a good night, Ocean.
and I will put a link to the correct scene in the show notes, is watch the guy playing his best friend. Watch Anthony LaPaglia, because he starts corpsing about 10 seconds before the camera is on him. And he never stops. It is not acting.
Yeah, he's just hiding his face, trying not to corpse visibly.
He is actually quivering with laughter. And Myers is doing that wonderful thing that comedians get every now and again in their career, where they're like, oh, I've got him. I'm going to get him some more.
And just doesn't stop. Yeah, exactly.
And it is just wonderful. I mention all of this firstly because, you know, much like Sings to Trees nurses injured animals, I nurse injured and unloved movies. And
you are the patron saint of lost causes.
I am.
And most of those causes are movies.
And also because Myers yesterday signed a deal with Netflix for a 6-episode show about a Canadian journalist who discovers the secret 5-person conspiracy that has been running the world since the 14th century. The show is called The Pentaverate.
More importantly, Alistair has a couple of friends who equally adore this lost gem. Let's be generous.
Overlooked treasure.
Overlooked treasure, yes. And the very excited person on the motorcycle outside that you can all ignore. And when this news broke, they started sending each other little videos of themselves quoting all the various lines. And that's what happened on TikTok. And I have another one to post on TikTok.
It made me so happy.
So happy.
So happy.
Ridiculously happy.
Anyway.
I should just jump on and say one more thing. This movie was filmed in 1993.
It has terrible representation.
Terrible mental health representation. It has very dated jokes. So I would encourage you to maybe check out some of those resources like the Dog Die or other things that provide content warnings for older movies before content warnings were a regular thing, because this movie has them. It's very dated.
You know, I would say that 1993 was a simpler time, but I think I just settled on it being a stupider one and leave it at that.
Exactly.
By the way, Pezzy, I have some possibly useful context for you on Operation Stalk Harrison Ford. Apparently, the stuntmen are all wandering around with much younger-looking Harrison Ford masks on.
Are you kidding me?
I've seen reports of like a motorbike chase sequence where apparently the stuntman is wearing like a young Harrison Ford mask. So I don't know whether they're doing flashbacks or whether he just feels a little insecure or what.
Can you imagine watching? Hey, honey, what did you do at work today?
I was Harrison Ford 40 years ago.
Imagine the conflict on that partner's face.
Brilliantly as well. Apparently, I found out today, apparently when Mama Cass from the Mamas and the Poppers saw Star Wars for the first time, in the middle of a crowded theatre when Han first appeared on screen, she yelled, "Holy shit, that's my pot dealer." Carpentry only gets you so far until your big break, you know? But no, I'm delighted that you're having fun. Like, out chasing him down and, you know, kidnapping
Respectfully chasing him down.
Respectfully chasing him down.
Socially distancedly.
Mr. Ford, remain there. I will remain here. If you move, nothing will happen.
I will not take a photo with you in the background.
Yes.
You may go now.
Goodbye, Mr. Ford. Thank you for your time.
Respectful kidnapping.
Yes.
Exactly.
I keep forgetting Mickelson's in Indiana Jones 5. That makes no sense to me. It's like, here is some balsamic vinegar. It's in your crisps. You know, it's
But
one.
balsamic vinegar crisps are actually tasty. I like those.
I'm
sorry. I apologize for the tangent.
I'm cautiously
Now
very.
I'm hungry.
Oh, I'm sure he looks like finely polished wood. Giggity. I really want it to be good.
She better be. She better be his daughter or something, because if she's his love interest, I'm gonna rage quit. She's writing on it, though, isn't
Yes,
she,
she
as
is.
well? Okay.
And she's also writing on that elaborate conspiracy that made it look like there was an extra Daniel Craig Bond movie that Universal pulled off last year. Gemma, we saw all the trailers for it, and we're like, there's a Bond movie coming out, and then they were like, ha 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 ha, bye.
Yeah, they still have the other one they haven't released yet.
Yes.
Exactly.
But yes, that was very exciting yesterday, and I continue chipping away at deadlines for all the various things that I can't talk about. And
the weather's been gorgeous.
the weather's been gorgeous, which for a Manx Wookiee kind of sucks, frankly.
I know, honey. I know you are not a summer person. It's all for me.
It's all for her.
It's all for me. My Kryptonian rays have to get fully deployed and recharged, because there's only a few weeks of the year in this cloud-benighted island where I can properly be a Californian. So I have to enjoy them. You can see all the freckles already starting to come back in.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth the suffering.
It's all for me. It's all mine. All my friends are like, and I'm like, oh. You know, exactly. We are also hiding under 50 SPF because I know how to take care of my skin. And there's a gigantic bottle of, you guys call it After Sun, and I call it aloe vera gel. So, you know, we're very good about skincare.
I would dunk myself in that like Luke in the Bacta tank in Empire Strikes Back if I could.
If we could get it, and if we could figure out how to make you breathe through.
Yeah.
So, we should get going.
Yes, we should.
On the story, because we have a pretty lengthy shenanigan this evening as well.
We've got you, Shenana fans.
Yes, exactly.
Big floppy hats. That reminds me. I keep trying.
What?
I keep trying to find that awesome 5 foot wide floppy hat for you.
I do not need a 5 foot wide floppy
Are you
hat.
sure?
Okay, fine. I'll write it down, and next week on the stream, I'll show everybody my hat. Because
Pezzy, you have nothing to apologize for. Indiana Jones is a pure and holy thing. And I mean, if we really wanted to get into it,
it doesn't work very well over the headset. But
I could perhaps point out I quite like Crystal Skull. Yes.
Anyway.
Is this a Resident Evil 8 reference? Not yet, I think, is the correct answer to that one.
I do like big sun hats. And again, not live. Anyway.
Oh, also, we continue to not quite get a PS5. Which is just, it's the epitome of first world problems. Like, oh no, I can't have a toy. Mother.
I know.
Jail for mother. You know?
Exactly.
But we'll get one, and then you'll play Mass Effect for 800 years.
Yes. Yes, I will. That is the plan. Though, the Nina Aquila Legal Eagle game comes out the week of my birthday. So
with Ben.
That's going to be fun. Yeah, I know Ben's in it apparently. I'm very excited. It'll be cool.
Oh, that's the other thing I've been doing. Lots of stuff on The Secret of St. Kilda. That I can't talk about yet.
Yeah, it's like his new favorite thing. Though if you haven't seen them, go look at the St. Kilda Twitter feed, because they've been recording the table reads they've been doing this week. And there are some delightful photos of the Zoom rooms. They're really cute.
Also, when you finally listen to the show, you can flagrantly speculate as to which two characters I'm 90% certain are based on people I grew up with.
How about a recap?
Previously on 9 Goblins, a whole
Dun-dun.
bunch of stuff went really, really wrong. Sergeant Nasilka is the senior officer for the Winding Niners, who are goblins and notionally soldiers. They're fighting a war against humanity, and it is a war which they're going to lose, because humanity has done that thing that we always do, where they've gone, this is nice, spread. Nasilka is very concerned with keeping her group of surprisingly competent goblins alive, including...
I think that's very generous of you.
Murray's pretty competent.
Murray's my boy, yo.
Thumper's pretty competent.
Thumper, get your nose, get your finger out of there.
Oh, that's Goober, who's perennially got fingers places poison ivy should never go.
I thought that was Thumper.
No, Thumper's the one that just hits people. Hence Thumper.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, they have, in the middle of this war with humanity, they find themselves facing off against a wizard. Wizards in this universe are terrifying because they can tear holes in reality. So, when this wizard sees this group of goblins sprinting towards it with murder in their heart and terror in their eyes, not unreasonably he tears a hole in reality and escapes.
E-Scarvers.
They go with him. The wizard is knocked into a coma by the trauma of all of this, and our intrepid group of goblins find themselves at least 50 miles away from the battle, on the wrong side of the mountain range they live in, and in curiously and increasingly worryingly quiet territory. Meanwhile, Sings to Trees is essentially James Herriot as an elf, as Henry Cavill. A good-natured...
The Henry Cavill part is, to be fair, our addition, but I'm taking it.
If you're pulling a unicorn foal out of a unicorn, you have upper body strength.
Well, thanks for that tangent.
You're welcome. You can stay there a while if you want. So he's basically a vet, and he's a vet for increasingly scary monsters and super creeps. And in this particular instance, there is a frankly terrifying moment where a skeletal deer and a skeletal doe emerge from the woods, and one of them has broken a bone. Thank you, Wendy, I knew you would. And he has to work out how to stitch it back together. Something bad is in those woods, or something very magical, and it's been woken up. And the goblins aren't quite sure whether they've done it, and Sings to Trees isn't quite sure whether he's done it. And his coyote could give a shit, because he's a coyote and he's awesome. Also, there's an amazing troll. Gra, gra, gra.
Gra, gra, gra.
Frog Snoggler is my favourite character so far.
Last week's MVP for sure.
Yes. So now, chapters 13 and 14. Chapter 13. As near as Nasilka could piece together from the badly upset Weasel, she and Thumper had been doing fairly well. They'd flushed a bird. Weasel had dropped it with a sling. Then it had started to go bad. Because when they'd startled the bird, they had also startled the deer. The deer took off across the clearing, and Thumper, seeing a whole banquet on the hoof, took off after it. Now, the fact that a goblin couldn't possibly catch a deer on foot had apparently not occurred to him. The deer ran, he ran, they broke into a clearing in the woods, and then he put his foot in a hole and went down hard. Weasel's first thought was that he'd broken a leg, but she didn't get close enough to see because the other occupant of the clearing had straightened up at that point. It was an elf. The elf had gone over to Thumper and crouched down, and Weasel didn't know what to do. Was he killing Thumper? Was Thumper killing him? Minutes dragged by. If it had been anyone else, Nasilka would have wondered why they didn't attack. But she wouldn't have put Weasel up against an injured field mouse. Sure, a sling can kill somebody if you use it right, but she'd have laid odds the thought hadn't even occurred to the little goblin. The elf stood up with a grunt. An unconscious Thumper was slung over his shoulder. There was blood on the goblin's head and a crude bandage. Bent nearly double, the elf made his way slowly across the clearing and into the woods. At this point, Weasel proved her worth utterly. She knew she couldn't track the elf once he was gone. She was pretty sure no one else in the 19th could either. Quick and quiet as her namesake, she followed. The elf had gone for nearly a mile, stopping occasionally to rest and set Thumper down. Weasel noted that the elf was being surprisingly gentle with his captive, and that he checked bandage, pulse, and pupils at every stop. This was not the behaviour she'd expect from elves, but then she'd never seen one anywhere but the other end of a sword before. At last, the elf emerged into a meadow, bright with wildflowers, dotted with bumblebees. On the far side, a large cabin rose under the trees, surrounded by a neat garden and a ramshackle barn. The elf set Thumper down and went to the barn. As soon as he vanished, Weasel darted out and shook Thumper's shoulder, but the big goblin was out like a light. His forehead was sporting an enormous lump. Either the elf had clobbered him a good 'un, or he'd smacked his head on a rock when he'd fallen in the meadow. The elf re-emerged from the barn, pushing a wheelbarrow. Weasel dropped low and scurried back to the tree line. As she watched, the elf sat Thumper into the wheelbarrow and took him up to the cabin. Weasel had watched only until Thumper vanished inside the cabin, and had then turned and run like a rabbit back to the 19th. It took all the way back to the clearing to get this story out of the very agitated Weasel, and even then, seeing the scene helped solidify the details. It was a very pastoral clearing, one of those that looks lovely and lush and green, and turned out to be sopping wet marsh under the plants. Sweet flag irises poked up proudly over the long grass, and Nasilka went over the ground carefully. And then she found a hole. It had a large goblin footprint in the mud at the bottom of it. A handprint skidded off to one side. There was a rock the size of a pig directly in front of it, with blood on it. Murray crouched down and looked. I'd say he stepped, fell, tried to catch himself. His hand slipped and he whacked his head. And then the elf came up here. He pointed to a line of heavy boot prints. Believe it or not, I could probably have figured all that out on my own, said Nasilka, a little dryly. Sorry, Sarge. It does mean that the elf probably didn't hit him, which may mean he's not violently opposed to all goblins. It is possible we'll be able to get Thumper back peacefully. And if we can't... Nasilka stood up and looked around at the other 7. The teddy bear and Wiggles the kitten watched from atop their respective owners' heads. They did not look very warlike, but they had what they had. Well then, she said, we'll get him back by any means necessary. The elf was out in his garden with his back to them. As the goblins approached, he straightened, rubbing his back and grimacing. Nasilka couldn't blame him. Lugging someone Thumper's size over his shoulder must have been agony. Nasilka figured stealth wasn't exactly called for here, so she cleared her throat. He turned around and saw 8 goblins in a tight knot, bristling with swords, clubs, and boards with nails in them, facing him. The elf was about 6 feet and lanky, with white hair in a loose braid and quizzical eyebrows. His clothes were odd. Elves usually looked immaculate. It was how you could tell they were elves. You could cut an elf's leg off and he would contrive to make it look as if 2 legs were unfashionable. Elves were just like that. It was one of their more annoying traits. But this one wore a loose shirt that had been washed so many times the sleeves had shrunk, revealing bony wrists and pants with carefully patched knees. He had the usual elven cheekbones, sure, but they were more smudged with dirt. He was a bit scruffy. And he did not look scared. And he did not look angry. He didn't even look very surprised. Probably he'd known that where there was one goblin, more would be coming. But he did look a bit bemused. His almond-shaped eyes travelled over the goblins, not missing either Wiggles or the teddy bear. Say something, hissed Nasilka, elbowing Murray in the ribs. What? Why me? You speak Elvish. Say something useful. But do it! Murray gulped, faced the elf, and stammered out a long phrase in Elvish, like a child repeating a speech it had learned by heart. The elf's eyebrows climbed until they nearly touched his hairline. He said something brief, and jerked a thumb to the left. Murray nodded weakly. What did you say? Nasilka demanded. I asked him where the bathroom was. What? Why? It's the only sentence I know. I think he said it was around back. I thought you spoke Elvish. I never said I spoke it well. Nasilka ground the heel of her hand into her forehead. When she looked up, the elf was watching her. She was expecting to find an expression of contempt or hatred or something, but he met her eyes with unexpected camaraderie, like the only other babysitter in a room full of children. What a beautiful line. I love that.
Oh, yeah, that's a gorgeous phrase.
How odd that our lives should bring us to this point, that look said. Despite herself, Nasilka warmed to it. Alright, can't speak Elvish, I know a bit of human. There's no telling if the humans here speak the same as the ones where we're from. The elf cleared his throat. Can you understand me? He asked in fair, if oddly accented Glibber. The 19th stared at him. Nasilka exhaled. Oh, thank the great grim gods, she said. You speak a civilized language. He smiled a little at that. It has been many years, but if you speak slowly, I think I can keep up. Now, you are probably here to see your friend, yes? They all nodded. Please follow me.
What accent is that?
Bad Welsh.
Yes.
Bad Welsh, bad Welsh, bad Welsh. She's bad.
Okay, somebody clip that for me, please.
Chapter 14. The inside of the house was one large room with high rafters, containing a kitchen, a fireplace, and a bed. The kitchen contained a really long wooden table. The fireplace contained a broad hearth, with a raccoon sleeping on it. The bed contained Thumper. Thumper! The 19th crowded around the bed. Thumper cracked one eye, groaned, and, not unreasonably, closed it again. Report, Private, snapped Nasilka. No. What? No. Sarge? Muttered Thumper. She grinned hugely with relief. I knew no rock could make that big a dent in your skull. Rest, you big idiot. Where am I? You're, safe? She looked at the elf, who nodded. Get some rest. Come, Marge. We're not going to leave you, Thumper. No goblin left behind and all that. You relax. It was not like Thumper to smile, but the big goblin's scowl had a relieved quality as he sank back into sleep. The elf's name was Sings to Trees, and he liked animals. This was something of an understatement. Many people like animals in the abstract. Sings to Trees liked them the way saints like lepers. He lived with them. He treated them. He patched them up and fed them and sent them on their way. It's a great line.
I've never realized. Ursula has a thing about lepers and leprosy. It's like the third leprosy reference in relation to Ursula I've heard this week.
In return, they kicked him and bled on him and oozed on him and had offspring in the middle of his bed, which was admittedly something that saints have rarely had to worry about from lepers. Your friend will be fine, he told Nasilka. It's nice having a patient who can actually answer questions. And before you worry, he held up a hand, I know there's a war on, but it's about 50 miles that away. Your friend is hurt. This isn't the front, so I'm not planning on turning you in, but you sure are a long way from home. Nasilka nodded glumly. Tell me about it. We didn't plan to be here. There was a wizard, and you know how that goes. He nodded. I doubt anybody's going to find you. Other elves don't come by here much. A little bit too much nature for them, I think. I thought all elves were, into nature, said Nasilka with a vague hand gesture that could have indicated either into natureness or raving insanity. Sings to Trees snorted. Sure, pretty nature. Unicorns and griffins, hummingbirds and sylphs, those little dragon butterfly things, the animals that don't smell bad and look pretty. But you get an egg-bound cockatrice that needs its cloacal vents oiled 3 times a day for a week, and suddenly everybody has pressing engagements elsewhere. I will not get through this next sentence intact. Oh, God bless you, Welsh via Liverpool. He's basically turning into Welsh via Tommy Lee Jones attempting to do foreign accents at this point.
Content warning. Accents.
What's a cloacal vent? Mishkin asked Algol, who told him. Both twins turned a little grey and gazed at Singster trees with awed disgust. And just tried to get them to patch up a bloody troll. Trolls are wonderful. He was pacing now. Zilka got the impression that this was a rant he'd been working on for some time, and he didn't often get a new audience to let you saw their off their head without flinching. I love trolls, and they keep you in all the goat meat you can eat too, but if one gets lost and goes wandering through some elf's backyard, are they understanding? No, it's all, call out the guards, there's a rogue troll on the loose. Bah, trolls are like kittens. He stabbed a finger in the direction of Wiggles, for emphasis, then paused. Which reminds me, let me get you some milk for that little guy. So how did you learn to speak, Glibber? At all? Asked Murray, while Singster Trees poured out a saucer of milk for the kitten, and Murray made tea. All 8 of the uninjured goblins had crowded round the long table in the kitchen. The wood was scarred from countless claws, and the edge had a distinctively gnawed look. There used to be a lot of goblins here. Some were my friends. Used to treat their pigs. He smiled. Sometimes I'd treat them too. I don't know if the state of goblin medicine has advanced much in the last 100 years. No, it's still pretty much amputate at the neck, said Murray. The elf... Sorry, that one...
Kiwi, that is a very valid question.
I'm sorry, that one kind of crept up on me.
Oh my!
It's that and the accident. Should we just kill him? Yeah, alright. The elf nodded. I was sorry when the tribe left. They were company anyway. Most elves don't come out this far. Humans aren't bad, really. I help their animals sometimes. Somebody comes up from the town every couple of days with cheese or bread or some such. Algol, Murray and Nasilka slid glances at each other at that, then quickly looked away. Murray looked at the ceiling, Algol at the floor. Nasilka ran a finger through a groove on the side of the table, which seemed to be a tooth mark from something with teeth the size of her thumb. Has anyone come up in the last few days? She asked quietly. The elf's forehead twisted. There was bread? No, that was a while ago. Now that you mention it, no. Nobody's dropped off food for almost a week. Nasilka nodded slowly. We were just out of the village. Well, at a farmhouse. There was no one there. You mean they left? No, I mean there's nobody there. The wagon's there, but no people, no animals. A mule left mid-bite. She shook her head. We didn't check the village, obviously, but we didn't see anyone. The elf shook his head. That is odd. It's really worrisome. Perhaps I should go look. Nasilka didn't want to go anywhere near that farmhouse again, but, well, he had fixed Thumper, and he did speak their language, kind of, and he wasn't turning them in. It would probably be better if he didn't get a chance to go off alone and have second thoughts about that last bit, come to think of it. Yeah, I really like that elves have a bad sense of time. I was last week. I was 30 years ago. Oh, okay.
Statement of the circle regarding sinister happenings.
Something spooky happened, didn't it? Leave me alone. What's this tape recorder do?
How is there a goblin word for tape recorder?
How is there not?
Murray.
There you go.
Okay.
We'll go with you in the morning, said Nasilka. Murray made a faint squeak of protest, and she silenced him with a glare. I'm going to at least show you where the abandoned farm was. Thank you. You're more than welcome to stay here for the night. Your friend's going to be on his back for at least 3 days, even as hard as goblin heads are. I want him in here so I can check on him every few hours, but if you all don't mind sleeping in the barn. With real straw? Asked Mishkin. And a real roof? Asked Mushkin. All the straw and roof you could want. The twins cheered. We should probably get dinner started too. Nasilka raised her eyebrows. Are you sure you want to feed all 8 of us? You're helping Thumper already. I don't want to eat you out of S&O. Singster Trees laughed in what he probably thought was a maniacal fashion, but there was something so inherently harmless about him that it looked more like he was practicing a peculiar bird call. Are you kidding? Finally an excuse to get rid of all that zucchini. I planted 2 plants this year, and now not even the trolls will come by for fear I'll throw zucchini bread at them. He started for the door. Okay then, Mishkin, Mushkin, go help the nice man with... Oh, hold on. Wrong accent. Alright then, Mishkin, Mushkin, go help the nice man with his zucchini. Algol, take Weasel and see to moving our stuff into the barn. Try and make as little mess as possible. We are guests. Gloober, if you stick your finger any further in your ear, you will go deaf, and I will have to learn sign language, so I can say, I told you so. Go help with the zucchini. Try not to put one in your ear. Having thus disposed of the troops, Murray, Blanchett, and Nasilka were left sitting alone at the long wooden table. Nasilka swirled the dregs of her tea around her mug. What do you think? She asked Murray. I think that it's highly unlikely he and Algol were separated at birth, but I still wonder. No, I've met Algol's mother, lovely woman, but goblin to the bone. Do you think we can trust him? Murray pulled on his ponytail. We don't have much choice until Thumper gets better, do we? I don't know. If you're asking whether I think he's keeping us here until he can call in the elves, I don't think so. He really doesn't seem the type. The bear trusts him, put in Blanchett. Point in his favour, thought Nasilka. Bear is usually a pretty good judge of character, and I'm even thinking that is probably a sign that I need my head examined. Singster Trees straightened up and watched the goblins picking zucchini. The twins were an indeterminate shade of grey-brown, and their lumpy, dirt-streaked skin blended surprisingly well with the earth. If they hadn't been cheerfully finishing each other's sentences, he would have had a hard time spotting them. He had been startled by the goblin, Thumper, running across the field, but once the poor chap had hit his head, there wasn't much help for it but to take him home. He'd known the others were going to show up, of course. You never get just one goblin. The surprising thing was that there were any here at all, what with the war. Singster Trees had always rather liked goblins. They reminded him of tiny trolls, ferocious-looking, often foul, generally without malice. He had no particular opinion about the war, except that it was probably a shame. In his experience, people were usually people, even the ones who were 4 feet tall and lumpy, and if you treated them well, they mostly returned the favour. He was quite sure the sergeant, the rather imposing female goblin with the bun and the put-upon expression, didn't quite trust him, but in her position, he wouldn't have trusted him either. Despite all warnings to the contrary, the one named Gloober was trying to insert a zucchini into his nose. Singster Trees sighed and went to go rescue his vegetables from a fate far worse than death. The goblins approved of the zucchini in goblin fashion. They sat around the table on barrels, crates, anything else that would hold them, complaining happily. This is terrible! Worst zucchini I've ever seen. Looks like baked dog turd. And they're gritty! Did you even wash them? What's with this bread? I could use it to fix my boots. I think this butter's about to turn. The 19th polished off 3 bowls apiece. 5 loaves of zucchini bread, and Mishkin and Mushkin were licking the casserole dish clean. Nasilka opened her mouth to explain the cultural differences to the elf, and that he was actually receiving a compliment, only to find him standing behind Blanchett's chair and beaming. Apparently he really did know goblins. All right, troops, take the man's bowls out to the pump and wash him, and do not half-ass it either. I want these clean enough to see my reflection. Murray, go supervise. Murray saluted idly and began herding the goblins out of the house. Blanchett started to rise, and Nasilka caught his shoulder. Not you, Blanchett. I want to see if we can do anything about your ankle. Oh, Sarge. Singster Trees knelt on the floor and caught Blanchett's foot in one hand. Nasilka revised her opinion of the elf's courage upwards. She would have used tongs. Does this hurt? Does this? How about this? After a few minutes of prodding, he dropped the foot and vanished into the kitchen, absently wiping his hands on his tunic. Just a moment. After a minute, the Silka got up and began wandering restlessly through the house, listening to the bang of crockery from the next room. It was a decent house. Didn't look like the kind of place an enemy would live. There were no swords crossed on the wall, no severed goblin heads over the fireplace. The house was a little too clean and airy for a goblin, but it had a comfortable lived-in look. It was battered furniture, faded rugs. There was a young raccoon in the hutch by the fire. She hooked a finger through the mesh and it licked her hand. Even the raccoons were friendly. Nasilka felt that she ought to keep her guard up, because, well, she was in enemy territory, damn it, in the very home of the foe, but it was hard when she was stuffed on the foe's zucchini bread, and the foe's baby raccoon was slurping at her fingers. Sings to Trees emerged from the kitchen, arms full of pottery. Steam wreathed his face and plastered lank blonde hair to his forehead. "Your ankle will be fine," he told the goblin, slathering some kind of herbal plaster on it. It made Blanchett smell very strongly of mustard, which was something of an improvement over smelling very strongly of goblin. "Now drink this." Blanchett eyed the mug of murky brown herbs warily. "How do I know you're not trying to poison me?" Sings to Trees sighed and dipped a finger into the mug, then slurped the liquid off it. "There, happy?" "Well, now you've put your finger in it." The Silka figured it was time to intervene. "Private, I know for a fact you haven't washed your hands since the war started. You have no business complaining about anybody else's fingers. Now drink the nice gunk already." Blanchett rolled his eyes upwards, possibly appealing to the authority of his teddy bear. After a moment, he grimaced. "He says to drink it." "Listen to the bear. The bear is smart. The bear is wise. Also, that is an order." With a much put-upon impression, Blanchett drained the mug. "Tastes like rat squeezings with too much honey," he considered. "Can I get the recipe?" "Off you go," muttered Nasilka, aiming a swat in his general direction. Blanchett dodged with surprising agility and hobbled out in good humour. "Thank you," she said to Sings to Trees. The elf waved dismissively. "He didn't try to bite, kick, or gore. It's already an improvement over most of my patients." She grinned. She couldn't help it. He passed her another mug of tea. "Might taste like rat squeezins, mind you, whatever a rat squeezin is." She rolled the liquid around on her tongue. "You are almost certainly happier not knowing. Anyway, tastes like mud and rancid sticks to me." He raised an eyebrow. "That means it's good." He nodded. "I remember. Took me a while to get used to the goblin courtesies." He gestured with his own mug. "Really? Thank you," she said. "It's damn decent of you feeding us and letting us stay here for a few days. We were really not cut out for the woods." "I'm glad to help." Sings to Trees stared into his own mug, possibly looking for the elusive rat squeezins. "Anyway, if the town really is deserted, I'll be glad of company." "Thanks for that, too," Azulka said. "Well, for what?" "For not immediately assuming that we'd done something to the people in the village. You didn't even ask that." "I appreciate that." He smiled faintly. "I have known too many goblins. They're crude and sometimes they're a bit wicked, but I've never known them to be vicious. It surprised me to hear there was even a goblin war." "Well, we had to do something," she bristled. He nodded. The silence stretched out while he ran a finger over the tabletop. "For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry your people were driven to that. I wish there'd been another way." A laugh startled them both. "That's the first time anybody's apologized." Odd little words. "I'm sorry." Nasilka found that she didn't feel any better about the war, but she did feel quite a bit better about Sings to Trees. "So, you said there was magic. Some poor wizard sent you?" Nasilka nodded. "I think he was trying to escape the battle, but we all came with him. Knocked him out cold, anyway." Sings to Trees gave her a worried look. What did you do with him? It was embarrassing, but she suddenly found herself afraid she might disappoint the elf, which made her feel defensive. There wasn't much we could do, she snapped. We couldn't very well take him with us. And when a bunch of goblins show up at a human town with a human body, people tend to shoot first and not bother with the question bit at all. He was silent. Masilka sighed. She had to stop snapping at him. He took it all as patiently as he probably took having Manticores vomit on him, but it wasn't fair. He was one elf. She couldn't make him stand for every elf that had ever been on the other end of a sword from her. I'm sorry. I truly am. I feel guilty and it's making me cross. We put a blanket over him and Algol got some water into him. I didn't know what else we could do. The elf nodded. Honestly, I don't know what else you could have done. Water and a blanket was a good thing. I could wish for a fire and food in him, but wizards. Well, if one woke up to a goblin troop, it could go very badly. Poor guy. He pondered. I could send a pigeon to the rangers and tell them to keep an eye out for a shocky wizard in that part of the woods. He paused. If you'd like to read it first. I wasn't going to tell them about you, but I understand. Masilka shrugged. I can't read Elvish. And it'd look awfully odd if you sent them a note in Glibber, wouldn't it? Well, there is that. Sings the Trees looked into his mug. Seemed surprised to find it empty. Began digging in a tin for more tea. I wonder why the wizard picked that as an escape route, though. The elf mused. They don't do well with surprises, most of them. I think one would want to go to a safe place, familiar surroundings. The middle of a forest under elven protection. Seems a little strange. Maybe he was from around here, said Nasilka, who'd been wondering something similar herself, if she was honest. The humans from the town can go into the forest, right? As long as they don't cut the trees or overrun. Sings the Trees nodded. There are fairly strict rules and quotas, and the rangers check up on those, but generally we find that as long as they know what they can and can't do, and that there'll be repercussions if they break the rules, the humans are pretty reliable. And the Silka sighed. Maybe that was our problem. We didn't make any rules. We just left. Sings the Tree shrugged. Might not have helped. Goblin tribes go everywhere, but they're usually pretty thin on the ground. You would have had a hard time enforcing the rules, whereas elves... Well, you're tall and impressive looking, and you can put an arrow into a squirrel's eye from 100 paces, said Nasilka. There's that. Yeah. We had charisma and numbers and mayhem. All you had were pigs and enthusiasm. It's not your fault. She called up the goblin army in her mind's eye and had to laugh. Pigs and enthusiasm described it pretty well. The silence that stretched out was companionable. Dusk had finished with the trees and was starting to work across the courtyard. Crickets chirped, and a few fireflies telegraphed their attractiveness to the world. She gathered the mug up to head back inside. I should probably go and make sure they haven't broken all your plates. The elf shrugged and followed. I've learned not to get too attached to plates. Here, take a lantern if you're headed to the barn for the night. She glanced over at Thumper, still asleep. Sleeping on a head wound worried her. She hoped the elf knew what he was doing. I'll wake him every few hours. That's part of why I want him here, where I can keep an eye on him. Oh, thank you. She grinned, showing blunt tusks. I seem to keep thanking you. Sings the Trees grinned back. So few of my patients can. It's a nice change of pace. Nasilka took the lantern down to the barn, where Algol and Murray were conscientiously overseeing the washing, and found, against all odds, that she was whistling.
Pigs and enthusiasm.
Pigs and enthusiasm. Those are two really lovely chapters.
Yeah, it is. It is a really nice kind of sequence.
I love that Ursula stays very true to her characters in that instead of attempting to fight these 9 idiot goblins, he's like, you obviously want some stew, and your moron friend here has a head wound. Let me help.
Yeah. Everybody's totally shipping the Silk and Sings the Trees. I wonder what Ursula would think of that.
That that line about Marie thoughts. Well, I'm unconvinced that he and Algol were separated at birth, but anything's possible. No, I've met Algol's mum, lovely woman, goblin through and through.
Yeah, exactly. Questionable parentage. So this is normally the part of the stream, folks, where we take a few minutes for a break because we've been going over an hour. So if you've been with us the whole time and haven't had a stretch or a sip of water, or if you made a cup of tea or a drink and it's gone cold, you might want to take a check on that. If you have to attend to any pets or medications or things like that, we'll be back in a couple of minutes. There will be a countdown on the return.
There will indeed.
If you don't see any numbers on the screen, you've got at least 60 seconds, and we'll see you in a few.
Oh, Pezzy, I feel that in my Manx Wookiee bones. I truly do.
What do you mean the ocean's too cold?
I just... We have a long weekend in Bournemouth, which we booked 17 months ago, 16, 17 months ago.
In the before time. In the long, long ago.
Which we are desperately hoping we're allowed to go do. And yeah, I just want to look at the ocean for a couple of days.
I want to swim. I don't care if it's cold. I'll get numb. That's fine. That works for me.
You get warm before you drown.
Thank you. Shall we shenanigan?
Yes, we shall. We're planning to look at the ocean for 4 days.
Yeah, exactly. We're basically planning to not be in our house. That's the plan. To just be away and be by a beach. A beach. Not... Oh, okay. No, I'm not going to go on this rant again. I went on this rant on Sunday. If you were with us on Sunday, I went on this rant on Sunday about...
I think a new show is presenting itself.
What?
I think a Rusty Quill rant show needs to happen. This little 5 minutes. Like episode 1 with Alex, like, right.
Here's the thing about Fahrenheit. And you were like... We need to talk about beaches. Exactly. We're going to the seaside for our health. Yes. We're taking a constitutional. Okay, please, sir. Please let me look at different walls. Please. Yes, exactly.
We might even be having
that is an excellent graphic, Pezzy. I'm digging it. That is very, very good. Yeah, we should have a rant show. You know how there's Enthusiasm that Helen put together? Alex and Ben should have the rant show. That sounds really good.
I am, as I often am, reminded of the old Lenny Henry routine which opens with the word cat flaps! Cat flaps! What is the sense in cat flaps? And goes on from there.
Fair.
Anyway, having worried you all tremendously, tonight's shenanigans is Peter versus Elias and his increasingly large collection of increasingly horrible mugs.
Content warnings.
Swearing. This is by Acero.
Kiwi, that's not accurate. I know Fahrenheit is terrible, but trust me, as someone who grew up on Fahrenheit and has been in the UK for a number of years now, it's okay. We can learn. You can do both. I can use kilometers and miles. And funny how we don't go on rants about miles over here, England.
It's like how we have an understanding over the last letter of the alphabet. How when we're in America, I pronounce it Z. And when we're here, I pronounce it Z.
That's correct. Because Z is the correct way to pronounce the final letter of the alphabet. Z is a man's name.
One of my favourite things about Stargate Atlantis was Rodney's belligerent insistence on referring to it as ZPM. Also just Rodney in general.
Very well.
The man who once uttered the line, I'm not casting aspersions, but if someone had left their secret HQ a little better guarded. Anyway.
Right. Let's get on with this.
Peter, to his eternal shame, was the one who started it. It had been their second anniversary of their fourth marriage, the only one so far to last more than 6 months. He had been returning to London on other business, mainly disappearing some of the left-out partygoers on whatever holiday this was, but he'd been told some documents needed signing too. 2 fish, 1 spear, he thought, and mentally patted himself on the back for the joke. It had been a very good day, though it had involved far more people than he would have liked, even if he had gotten to disappear several of them. The only reason he'd remembered it all was Tadeus' raised eyebrow when he'd returned to the tundra. You and the missus break up again, Cap? He asked with a wry grin. Peter began to feel very uneasy. The missus.
Tadeus, I love
you. Holding the phone. Captain, your wife, son. What? No, Talon. He'd picked up the habit of referring to people with the wrong names after spotting a joke along those lines a few years back. Thaddeus had put up with it admirably. Elias had divorced him on the spot. We're approaching 2 years now, actually. It's going quite well. Ah, well, in that case, Captain, I'd like to congratulate you on your 2nd anniversary. Today. Peter winced so hard he fell into the lonely. Thaddeus was still standing there when he rematerialized, facing an expression of flat amusement that would have gotten him chucked into the fog had he not been the only person alive who actually knew how Peter's accounts worked. Which was expertise he would most likely need very soon, since he seemed to be hurtling straight for yet another divorce. Damn. We'll be departing in the morning, Tom, of course. Do tell the crew for me. Aye, aye, Captain. Peter didn't know if the eyes on his back were his first mate's or his husband's, but they watched his ears flame red regardless. He'd spotted the mug in a window shop across from the dock. It was set very casually off to the side of the 100-some mug display. Every sailor's life deserves a trophy wife, in plain black and white with fancy script. Well, Elias was probably drawing up the divorce papers already. Might as well go out with a bang. He popped into the Lonely, grabbed the mug, and left the shop without paying.
Peter!
When he rematerialized, it was to a taunting candlelit dinner, and Elias, of course, tapping his pen impatiently on a sheaf of papers. Peter didn't have to be aligned with the beholding to know what they said. Well, Elias raised an eyebrow at him. Silently, under the weight of his soon-to-be ex-husband's many eyes, Peter reached into his voluminous coat and pulled out the mug. It was like watching a shipwreck in slow motion. Elias's eyes closed, only the physical ones, of course, and he took a deep breath in through his nose. His lips tightened and rolled inwards. Peter swore he even saw his shoulders shaking, though he couldn't say exactly why. There was a very, very long pause. His husband exhaled sharply. Peter. Yes, Elias? Sign the papers. Yes, Elias. He signed where the neat little tabs directed him to with a flourish, and prepared to step back into the Lonely when Elias raised a hand. I'll expect you for our first date in 3 hours. You will be paying. Peter grinned. Oh, of course, Elias. And Peter? Yes? Leave the mug. Peter did, and returned to the Lonely with a bounce in his step. He didn't begin to regret it until a few months later, when Elias brought the mug to their 5th wedding. And everyone after that.
I would just like to jump in here to point out that this author has made the section breaks of the AO3 post
Little eyes.
Little eyes. It's the cutest thing ever.
Elias, I need a few documents dealt with if you would. Of course, Peter. Please wait to terrorize my receptionist later. I've got them in my office. The receptionist, Rosie was it, spotted at him. Peter winked at her and lumbered after his husband. She seems capable enough, I'd say, Peter said, peering around the room. Where'd you find her? Elias. What is that? Elias reached to another cabinet, accentuating his very shapely... No, stay focused, Peter. Oh, I'm afraid I've got my hands full. You'll have to specify. He was smirking. The utter bastard. Peter huffed. Shut it, Elias. You know what I mean. Oh, it was a gift, he said, finally, turning with a sheaf of papers in his hand, and the smirk growing on his face. From my archivist. I think she's finally warming up to me. The glitter in his eye said he thought no such thing. Peter was inclined to agree. It says World's Worst Boss on it, Elias. It's a cheap novelty mug. It probably cost... How much did dishes usually cost again? Less than £200. At least. Elias coughed loudly. How strange, Peter thought. He hadn't sounded sick. Oh, well, he seemed fine enough on the whole. Not like you have much room to talk, given our last anniversary gift, he said with a raised eyebrow. Peter winced. And yes, Peter, he added dryly, it probably did cost less than £200. Well, there you have it then. Indeed. Elias shuffled the papers around on the desk while Peter inspected the mug more closely. It looked to be second-hand, even very much stained. He was proud of his original judgment. This was certainly less than £200, maybe even less than 150. Very cheap. Pity it's wrong, though. Oh? Well, I'm clearly a worse boss than you. I'm sure my crew would agree. Is that so? Peter. Elias handed him the papers with a raised eyebrow. Perhaps we should bet on it. In the meantime, though, sign these papers, please. I do have places to be, you know. Of course, Elias. Dinner at 7? Certainly. Peter, so glad you've arrived. I'll have those papers out momentarily. We need an increase in funding this year, as it seems my archivist is now in Guinea. Ugh, Peter shuddered slightly. I'd quite dislike the idea of my money helping her in any way. You know, especially after... Yes. Your failed ritual. Remind me again, what did losing that bet cost you? Peter grimaced. It was just like his ex-husband to rub salt in the wound. The ocean was a far better spouse in comparison, he thought. There was a long pause as his husband shuffled papers. I'd like a cup of tea, Elias. Of course, mugs are in the cupboard to your left. There's only a few left at the moment. I'm sterilizing the others. Peter trod over to the cabinet and pulled it open. He paused for a second, blinking at the two novelty mugs sitting on the otherwise empty shelf. The first, in text Peter thought rather too elaborate for how awful it looked, read, Grumpy Old Man Club, founding member, only happy when complaining. The second, to his growing discomfort, was absolutely covered in black and white eyes. Elias, Peter said, unable to look away, I think this is getting out of hand. There was a small line of text at the bottom that read, Only have eyes for you. The eye nearest to it winked at him, and Peter shuddered, quickly grabbing the old man mug and shutting the cabinet behind him. Awful man. Careful, Peter. Keep saying such sweet things. I'll begin to think you're proposing. He turned back around to see Elias casually half sitting against the table, holding his own mug. The owl on it was telling him to fuck off. Peter was suddenly very tired. Why, Elias? I'm sure I have no idea what you mean. He took a drink. Elias, that mug says you have irritable owl syndrome. What an atrocious pun. How dare you make it in my presence? It's your mug, Peter said, sounding almost petulant. Elias hid his smirk behind another sip of tea. Not like this one is much better, Peter grumbled as he poured himself a very small splash of tea, and then a very large amount of milk. Even if you really did found this grumpy old man club you call an institute, Elias choked very briefly on his tea. Peter ignored him. What on earth would your employees think? I'd imagine they'd quite agree with you, given it was a gift from Rosie. Peter stared at him. You're kidding. Oh, I'm afraid not. I very briefly entertained the notion that she knew something, of course, but as it turns out, she just heard Gertrude make a snide comment and thought it suited me. Peter snorted. She's not wrong. Don't worry, it quite suits you too, dear. He huffed a little in irritation, and Elias smirked at him. Yes, just like that. Really now, Elias, and after I've been so good to you... Debatable... He interjected around a sip of tea. Oh, for... Very well. Let me see the documents, and I'm leaving. You can sit over here and have your owl syndrome in peace. Oh, but it's so fun to watch you get rattled, dear. Peter glared at him, and Elias made his, "Oh, very well, petty one, I'll indulge you just this once, dear," look, Peter's least favourite of Elias's condescending expressions, and whipped out a pen. "There you are. I do have to get my little pleasures in somewhere, darling. Marriage does take two." Peter now finished scrawling his name on the various indicated lines, rolled his eyes, and disappeared into the ether. Elias would be insufferable for having the lost word, but at least it was more tolerable than listening to him for one more second. Days like this, he wondered why they hadn't left it after the first divorce. Peter strolled out into Elias's office to find him chatting with Simon Fairchild. This was not in itself unusual or especially unsettling. Peter rather liked Simon, as much as he liked anyone. Bye! Personally, he fancied it was because they were kindred spirits, purveyors of very similar domains, both with delightfully tasteful senses of humour. Elias thought it was his daddy issues. This had, of course, resulted in divorce number 7. So no, this wasn't in itself a problem, aside from the array of the worst mugs yet arranged across Elias's desk. "Ah, Peter, lovely of you to join us. Very auspicious timing, I must say. I brought a gift for you both." At this, Peter tried to step backwards into the comforting, welcoming fog, but his awful husband was just enough within reach to grab his arm and pull him back. Damn. Simon ignored their antics entirely. "Congratulations on your latest wedding, by the way." "Congratulations on your latest wedding, by the way. The 10th, is it?" 11th, Elias said, when Peter didn't answer, tinged with that particular flavour of his usual charm that meant he was enjoying Peter's pain. Bastard. 11th. My, how time flies. Well, last time I was here, Elias was kind enough to show me his grumpy old man mug. Did you see it, Peter? Delightful, and bought me one of my own. I was quite inspired, and when I stumbled across this website, just in time for your latest wedding, well, I knew exactly what to get you. Here you are, then, boys. He held 2 of the atrocities out in front of him. They were tall, taller than most mugs, and the imagery was busy and detailed in a way that made Peter's head ache just looking at it. The most striking thing, of course, were the actual subjects. One had, of course, a very vivid drawing detailing an eye, and the other was labelled Anatomy of a Sailboat. They were clearly intended to be a matching set. Peter hated them on sight. Elias plucked his out of Simon's precarious grasp with his free hand to inspect it more closely. There was a smile on his face at the eye on the inner rim. If Peter didn't know better, he'd say Elias was actually touched. "Oh, the detail is lovely, Simon. We're both very grateful. Aren't we, dear?" Peter couldn't remember what he'd done to deserve this hell. All the people he'd sent to their own internal torment were, of course, conveniently ignored. So he merely nodded lightly and made no move to reach for the mug. Elias tightened his grip on Peter's arm with a charming smile. "Perhaps it would be best to set them on the table for now, Simon. I seem to have my hands full." "Oh, but of course. Marriage sure is a handful, isn't it? It's only ever caught my own interest in passing, but the 2 of you seem to do quite well, between divorces, of course. Anyway, Peter, regarding the Daedalus." Peter, who had been quite busy pretending he was literally anywhere else, looked up. "I found this other mug from the same site. Isn't it just perfect? It was an impulse, I know, but I just couldn't let it go to waste. One for you and one for me, I'd say." He pulled out another mug just as awful as the last. This one about space exploration. Peter wanted to cry. Elias was clearly having the time of his life. "Just to let you in on a little secret, I bought one for Mike. You know Mike, of course, or at least Elias does. I found one that says it's about electricity. It has all these delightful little lightning motifs on it. It'll be perfect for his birthday. He'll try to strike me, of course, but what's life without a little spark? Ha ha!" "That sounds wonderful, Simon," Elias said. "I'm sure he'll be delighted." Peter, deciding he had absolutely enough of old men for a day, and thanked the Forsaken, with Elias's grip relaxed just enough that he could slip out of it, disappeared back into the relief of his lonely fog before he could hear anything more. He'd leave another divorce note on Elias's desk in the morning. The next time Peter popped in to see Simon and Elias chatting up and matching ballroom dance mugs, he didn't even give them a chance to greet him, before walking straight back out.
This is a thing of absolute glory.
Oh God. Oh God, he'd been wrong. Simon's mugs were not the worst in existence. The one Elias held now, that was in a category all of its own. It appeared to be handmade. Quite well done, Peter supposed. And that was the only good thing about it. The colour was a deeply violating chartreuse and black. It was covered in eyes and owls and everything in between. Worst of all, the text snaking along the outside read in giant eye-framed letters, "Bossin', flossin'," and, Peter shuddered, "ceaseless watching." He supposed it must have been a pun, or perhaps one of those Mimi things he'd heard Elias try to explain the last time he was drunk. It didn't matter. He was the most horrified he'd been since the last time he'd met a flesh avatar. "I commissioned it myself, Peter," said Elias, his tone almost chiding. "It seemed a valuable use of Institute funds. You trust my judgment on the matter, of course." Peter stared at him. Elias took a long, slow sip of tea, revealing the disturbingly realistic eye that took up the entire bottom of the cup. "Elias," he said at last. "Yes, Peter?" He was awful. Why did Peter like him so much? "I want a divorce." Elias very deliberately set the mug down on Peter's probably important documents. He would be very upset if you know what any of them said. "We've already had one. We're in between marriages at the moment." "I'd like another one then." "Very well, Peter. If you'd like, I suppose I could arrange for a short wedding at one of those smaller chapels tonight, and we can get divorced in the morning," Elias said indulgently. "Before I do, though," he tipped his head back and swallowed the rest of his tea, "I'd like you to inspect the inside. For funding purposes, of course." He held the mug out with a smug grin. "Elias, our next marriage and divorce is, of course, contingent on this." Elias raised an eyebrow at him. The grin somehow became smugger. "Bastard." Peter took the mug with a sigh, fully intending to drop it on the floor, but before he could, he glanced inside the mug. On the bottom was painted a miniature drawing of the tundra, misty fog surrounding it and creeping up the sides. It was quite detailed, and to his horror, Peter found himself almost touched. To make matters worse, lying flat on top of it was a ring. "Has been a while since we've had a proper proposal," Elias said with a smile, soft as it had been that momentous occasion several decades ago when he'd first suggested the idea of marriage. "For tax purposes," he said seductively. "I thought the occasion might, merit it." "Oh, damn," Peter thought, irritatedly pulling his fiancée into a swooping kiss. Getting married twice in a row was going to make for an awful lot of paperwork. I love that.
That has to be framed. Notes. This was very nearly 5 times Elias's mugs got them divorced, plus one time they did the opposite. But I got tired of writing the words "I want a divorce" over and over. Anyway, all of the mugs included in this fic are, in fact, real mugs that exist in this universe. Most of them you can even buy. Ignore Peter's mug opinions. We can tell from the very start that he has the worst taste. And then at the bottom of the AO3 post are links to buy all of the mugs.
"Bossin', flossin', and ceaseless watching."
Oh my god, the very audacity of that phrase. There's even a TikTok video of the creation of the last mug.
The moment I love in there more than anything else is he was so awful. Why did Peter like him so much?
I think that's their relationship in a nutshell, isn't it? Good grief.
And just, Simon completely ignoring their horrible marriage problems. It's, "Hello! Terribly enthusiastic. Isn't this splendid?"
I'm just here to help. I'm Simon.
I got one for Michael. He'll try and attack me.
Gosh, that was a whole look. Very much so. Tell the nice folks where they can find us next Sunday.
Oh, all sorts of places. This coming Friday, our Hugo-nominated pop culture newsletter, The Full Lid, will go live to just under 1,000 inboxes at 5 p.m. British Standard Time. Then on Sunday, we will continue to explore our mysterious the new world that we have crashed on, in kind of adorable hover roller skate No Man's Sky cooperative romance game Haven.
That was the longest intro for the shortest game
and
title
yet
ever.
Weirdly accurate.
Well done.
And then next Wednesday we will be back here for more 9 Goblins.
That's correct. We will. I think we have 2 installments left, maybe 3. Quick, let me check my notes. Thank you. 3. We have 3 more installments. And then, of course, coming up on June 23rd, we have a very momentous occasion, and that is, it is the boy's birthday.
The Chungus.
Yeah, Chungus's birthday will be on June 20th, so I don't know how on earth we're going to celebrate that in a way that doesn't involve baking siblings, so...
Well, I mean,
I'll have to think about that.
There is a possibility in it. It's one which is still very lightly formed, that we may be going to the States at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And you had discussed acquiring some starter from your aunt, hadn't you?
Yeah, but what's that to do with the birthday?
That we could perhaps get Chungus a pet at the end of the year.
Ooh. We could promise Chungus a pet. There's all sorts of ethical considerations there.
There are.
Says the lawyer. That's a whole nother hour. Okay.
Thank you so much, all of you, for listening. It means the world. This is great fun. We love doing it, and we're so happy that you like it too.
Thank you very much for joining us. We will see some of you on Sunday morning, 10 a.m., when we'll be playing Haven and making coffee. And then we'll be back here next week. In the meantime, you can also find himself over on TikTok doing TikTokerly
TikToks.
Things.
The clock app.
TikTokerly things, what talk and tick. Wow, it's getting late. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
Have a good one, everyone. See you soon.
And we'll see you soon. Something. I'm really sorry. Hi, everybody. Are you still there? This is ridiculous. Anyway, stream show notes. So you know how at the end of the stream we'll do a Twitter thread that has all the episodes and everything that we've linked to. Well, we're changing where they're going to be. They won't be on Alistair's Twitter thread anymore. They're going to be on the main Escape Artist thread. Alistair will retweet it today so that you can find it. Yeah. But don't be surprised if it gets... because it's been moved to somewhere else. Sorry for the fake out. We're gonna really go now.
Bye.
Bye.